From the beginning, I've been saying prepositions are crazy. They're like wild cards. They can mean anything. But then I made the first video in this series how prepositions work. In that video, I showed you and realized myself prepositions can get crazy, but most of the time actually they use prepositions in Spanish just like we use them in English. It's simply a matter of knowing the vocab. Then in the second video, por versus para, an introduction, we started to focus on the ways they don't use prepositions like we do. And por versus para is a glaring example. Not the easiest idea, but that video is a good start. However, there are other reasons prepositions are tricky for us English speakers. A few different reasons actually. And all of them come up when we use prepositions with verbs. Hola, soy Jordan, and this is a Spanish Quickie. Fast, easy Spanish lessons from somebody who speaks your language. Okay, this is gonna be the last preposition video for a while. To really cover prepositions thoroughly, I'll be making a new premium course fairly soon, Preposition Bootcamp. If you're a lifetime member, obviously you'll get it for free as you do every premium course. If you're not a lifetime member, to get that course, either become one or sign up to the Spanish Dude newsletter and I'll announce when I release it. Now remember, most of the time, they use prepositions in Spanish just like we do in English. I'm working on a project would be trabajo en un proyecto. En basically means in or on, so this is a perfect match. Also, don't forget, in Spanish, when a verb follows a preposition, it always goes in the infinitive form. So I insist on paying would be insisto en pagar. Notice we say paying, the ing form of the verb, after on, which is a preposition, but they say pagar, the infinitive form of the verb, after en, which is a preposition. Now in this video, we're going to cover 5 specific situations in which prepositions are used differently in Spanish than they are in English. And all 5 situations involve a preposition following or not following a verb. You'll see what I mean in a second. Situation number 1. Sometimes in English, we use a preposition, but they don't in Spanish. A good example is with buscar, which means to look for or to search for. Notice the for. Buscar isn't just to look or to search. Buscar is to look for or to search for. So I look for the house would be busco la casa. Since buscar means to look for, busco la casa means I look for the house, even though there's no por or para or any other preposition. The for is kind of built into buscar. Another common example of this is escuchar. Escuchar means to listen to, not just to listen. So I listen to the music would be escucho la música. You don't say a because to is already built into escuchar. Escucho la música, I listen to the music. One last example of this, esperar. Esperar means to wait for or to hope for, among other things. So I wait for the bus would be espero el autobús. You don't say por or para because the for is already built into esperar. Espero el autobús. Now, you just have to memorize which verbs work like this. It's the only way. But to make it easier on you, I created a word list with the most common ones. That word list is below this video or in the description. Okay, situation number 2. Sometimes we don't use a preposition in English, but they do or can in Spanish. Take a look at this sentence. I trust in you. The best way to say that is confío en ti. That's basically a direct translation. Pretty straightforward. But then look at this sentence. I trust you. I think a lot more common to say. Well, the best way to say I trust you in Spanish is confío en ti. Notice we don't say in, but they do say en. You really do have to say en here too. Saying te confío in this case would be wrong. But remember, not all verbs work like this. That's why you just have to memorize which ones do. Creer, or to believe, works just like it does in English. I believe you. Te creo. That's perfect. Then I believe in you would be creo en ti. Both sentences are the same in Spanish and English. Terminar is interesting. Terminar means to finish or to end. And when finishing nouns, terminar works the same way it does in English. We have to finish the game. Tenemos que terminar el juego. A direct translation. But when finishing verbs, terminar doesn't work like it does in English. It takes on the preposition de. We have to finish eating would be tenemos que terminar de comer. We don't say a preposition in English, but they do in Spanish. and you can't say tenemos que terminar comer without the de. That's just wrong. Now, I know this might seem like a nightmare, but don't forget, most of the time, they use prepositions exactly like we do in English. We're just focusing on the differences in this video, which are the minority. And even for these weird ones, once you learn and practice them a bit, you really will get used to them quickly, especially the more common ones. I didn't say that about por and para. Those are hard, lots of rules, and even when you're really advanced, you'll make mistakes with por and para, but not these. Practice these. Practice them more than a little. Say them so many times correctly, when you hear them said incorrectly, you squirm in disgust because they sound so horribly wrong. Okay, situation number 3, and this is basically a subset of situation number 2. I'm only separating it because it confused me in a different way. It concerns the preposition a. Remember from way back in both English and Spanish, when two verbs are next to each other, you conjugate the first one but not the second. So I want to speak Spanish would be quiero hablar español. In English, you conjugate the first verb, I want, but not the second verb. It stays in the infinitive form, to speak. Same thing in Spanish. Conjugate the first verb, quiero, but not the second, hablar. Well, in Spanish, only sometimes, and only with specific verbs, you still add an a for to, even though you're already saying to because of the infinitive. Aprender works like this. Aprender means to learn. So I learned to speak Spanish would be aprendo a hablar español. You're kind of saying I learned to speak Spanish, but not really. It just seems like that. Empezar is another example of this. Empezar means to start or to begin. I want to start to learn to speak Spanish. Oh, this is a good example. That would be quiero empezar a aprender a hablar español. Quiero, which comes from querer, doesn't get a after it, but quiero empezar still means I want to start because empezar is the infinitive form of the verb. Then both empezar and aprender do get the a after them, but that doesn't translate to I want to start to learn to speak Spanish. Those a's essentially have no meaning. We've seen this before actually, where the a has zero meaning, the personal a. I made a video about it and the link is below or in the description. The personal a is different than all this. Watch that video if you haven't already. Some verbs get an a after them, some don't. On the word list below, I included some of the most common ones that do. Situation number 4, and this was the most confusing to me, and I think this is what scares us about prepositions in general, in addition to por and para, of course. Sometimes we use a preposition in both English and Spanish, but we use different prepositions, and sometimes, especially at first, it sounds very wrong to say it right. I first encountered this with the verb pensar, which means to think. In English, we think about things. I think about my friends. Or maybe we think of things. I think of my friends. In both sentences, I'm imagining my friends. Well, in Spanish, in this case, they don't think about things or of things. They think in them or on them. They use en instead of about or of. I'm thinking about my friends would be pienso en mis amigos. Now, I have read in some books you can say pienso de mis amigos with the de, and that would be a lot more natural for us, but in my experience, that's not the case. Just to make sure, I put a call into my friend Nicolas in Colombia. He confirmed pensar de really just doesn't work here, despite what you may read or hear elsewhere. Nicolas did point out pensar de is usable, but for when you give an opinion. What do you think of this brand? ¿Qué piensas de esta marca? That sentence is about an opinion, but when you're imagining something, when you're thinking about something or of something, use en. Another similar example is soñar, which means to dream. In English, we dream about or of things. I dream about traveling to Europe, or I dream of traveling to Europe. Well, in Spanish, they don't dream about or of things, they dream with things. They use con. I dream about traveling to Europe. Sueño con viajar a Europa. And this is why I used to say prepositions are crazy. They're like wild cards. They can mean anything, because sometimes that's kind of true. But if you think about it, it's the same in English. Really, what is the difference between sitting on a chair and sitting in a chair? Why do we ride in a car? And saying on a car sounds silly, but on a bus is okay. On a train is just fine. On a plane is perfectly acceptable, but don't you dare say on a car. So sometimes in Spanish, they just use a different preposition than we do, to, like with pensar and soñar. Get over it. Saber is another interesting example. Saber oddly has two different meanings, to know or to taste. In this video, we're focusing on saber as to taste. In English, when one thing tastes similar to another, we say it tastes like. So it tastes like chicken. Well, in Spanish, they oddly use a for like in this case. So it tastes like chicken in Spanish would be sabe a pollo. My friend Nicolas sent me this meme after our conversation. Cristianos, católicos, budistas, judíos, musulmanes, ateos, agnósticos, todos saben a pollo. Do you understand? This part says they all taste like chicken. Even though it's a in Spanish, when translated, it means like. Okay, last situation. Situation number 5. This is probably the one that comes up the least. Sometimes in Spanish, they can use different prepositions to mean the same thing or something slightly different. This can happen when we say a preposition in English or when we don't. Take llenar, for example. Llenar means to fill. I fill the glass with water. You could say that with lleno el vaso con agua, and that would be totally correct and sound totally normal. But you could also say that same sentence with lleno el vaso de agua. So de instead of con. And that's also correct and also wouldn't sound weird at all. And really, I fill the glass with water or I fill the glass of water, what's the difference? Lleno el vaso con agua and lleno el vaso de agua mean exactly the same thing. Say it however you want, but be ready to recognize both when you see them. Another example of something similar is disfrutar or to enjoy. I enjoy my friends. In English, we don't use a preposition, but in Spanish, oftentimes they do. First, in this case, you can't just say disfruto mis amigos. Mis amigos are people, so you have to add the personal a. Watch the video on that if you don't understand why right away. But even after you add the personal a, disfruto a mis amigos might be technically correct, but it sounds weird. Disfrutar would be better in this case with de or con after it. I enjoy my friends could be said disfruto de mis amigos or disfruto con mis amigos. Both those sentences would translate to I enjoy my friends. But this time, these two sentences do have subtly different meanings. When you say disfrutar de something, it implies that thing amuses you. So with people, it sounds kind of egotistical, like you're the king and they're just there to amuse you. Disfruto de mis amigos means more my friends amuse me, and disfruto con mis amigos means more I enjoy being with my friends. Generally, they say con with people and de with things. I enjoy my friends, disfruto con mis amigos. I enjoy a piña colada, disfruto de una piña colada. But you could also just say disfruto una piña colada. I know, it's confusing. My suggestion is to assume every preposition and every verb work in Spanish exactly like they do in English, then memorize the ones that are different as you encounter them. So it makes me sad when I see most books clump it all together. You have to search through their long, crappy lists to pick out verb-preposition combos that aren't normal. To get rid of that sadness, here's what I did. I went through those lists and picked out all the verb-preposition combos that give me the most trouble, and I put them on the word list below. I'm sure I missed a few, and I'm sure there are some that won't give you as much trouble as they gave me. But the point of the word list below isn't to be a complete list of every verb-preposition combo in the world. It's to show you the most common or tricky differences. Then you can learn the others one by one as you encounter them. If you're a lifetime member, you'll get the premium course Preposition Bootcamp when I release it for free. That course will dig deep into the nitty-gritty details of this stuff. If you're not a lifetime member, become one or subscribe to the Spanish Dude newsletter. Either way, you'll get word when I release the new course. Download the word list below. Make flashcards for every verb preposition combo on that list. Then use the flashcard strategy to memorize the heck out of them. If you know these combos, in addition to the information from the last two videos, I'm telling you, get out there and use your Spanish, and you'll see right away you're a whole lot better with these prepositions, but they're still crazy. I'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Adios, amigo.